can't just ticket me for this, Deborah. That's my mother's spot." I was still gripping the brown envelope when she looked up from her clipboard, lips pursed like she'd just sucked a lemon. "You're not listed as the primary resident anymore. Board policy, that vehicle's out of compliance." I didn't blink. "The RFID sensor in the entry gate? I wrote the firmware. I know exactly when I pulled in and exactly how long I was parked. Try again." "My name's Darren Wells, architectural consultant. I inherited Unit 4B in Crescent Pines after my mother passed last winter. And no, Deborah from the HOA doesn't get to tell me where I can park, especially not when the concrete slab I pulled into still has her initials etched under the faded paint. She poured that slab herself during the rebuild in '92. After the kitchen fire. It's not just a parking space, it's history, it's hers, and now it's mine. Where are you watching from? Let me know. And if this already feels personal, you might want to stick around. The trouble didn't start with sirens or screaming. It started the way HOA wars usually do, passive-aggressive notes and nonsense about policy enforcement. The fine was $250, 0 cents, for a non-registered guest vehicle. My vehicle. Registered, tagged, insured, and parked in a numbered spot assigned to my unit. Still, the notice was printed and taped to my windshield like I was some out-of-town squatter who stumbled into a gated paradise. I took the elevator back up, seething. Unit 4B was quiet. Mom's wind chime still hung by the sliding doors, soft and tangled from the spring wind. Her jasmine plant, what was left of it, sat dry in the corner. I kept it there because I couldn't bring myself to throw it out. That balcony was her favorite spot. The chimes, the jasmine, her faded red chair with the loose screw. Every time I stepped out, I heard her voice. "Don't forget, this building's only still standing because we refused to leave it." She'd fought to keep her unit back when Crescent Pines tried forcing legacy owners to sell. They wanted to rezone the place, get in a higher income tenant class. Mom took the board to arbitration and won. It wasn't just home to her, it was a reminder. You can stand your ground even when the papers say otherwise. So yeah, I'm not here to play nice with bureaucrats in cardigans. When I brought the ticket back to the HOA office, Melinda Harper was waiting. President of the board. She didn't even look up from her tablet. "All parking policy disputes must be submitted through formal appeal." Her tone was flat, robotic. "The vehicle's in violation, Mr. Wells. I'm not some Airbnb guest, Melinda. This is my deed." I held it up. She didn't even flinch. "Your name doesn't appear in the building's updated digital registry." That made me pause, because I knew I filed the ownership transfer 6 months ago. She was either bluffing or cooking the records. I couldn't prove it yet, but my gut said there was more here than just a parking vendetta. Back in Unit 4B, I fired up my laptop. The HOA's portal had changed. New layout, new document access tiers. I clicked through 3 menus, only to hit a restricted access banner. The registry was now behind a login only, accessible by current residents as confirmed by the HOA board. That was their game. They were digitally ghosting me out of my own property. I called Lissa next door. She used to be a journalist before she burned out on media politics, still sharp as hell. She brought over a bottle of ginger ale and a box of shortbread cookies. "They're isolating you," she said, scrolling through the bylaws. "If you're not in the system, you don't get a vote, can't contest board decisions, can't attend meetings. It's not about your parking spot, it's about your voice." I stared at the HOA newsletter sitting on the table. Spring compliance season printed across the top like it was a happy festival. Right underneath it, in bold, "Failure to comply with resident vehicle protocol may result in towing." "They're daring me to act out," I muttered, "so they can call security." Lisa nodded. "This is how they win, one silent deletion at a time." But what they didn't know, what they didn't expect, was that I wasn't just another passive owner. I build systems for a living. I audit projects. I design security parameters and back doors. That digital gate they think they control, I helped upgrade it 2 years ago. Their whole platform might be run on a skin, but I've seen its bones. And bones tell the real story. The sticker wasn't the end. It wasn't even the beginning. It was a warning shot. And I don't lose to people who smile while stealing what's yours. I stood in the balcony doorway that night, half shadowed by the blinds, watching the garden lights blink out one by one. It was always quiet at Crescent Pines this time of year, too early for tourists, too cold for pool parties. But that silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It felt staged, like a soundproofed lie. The jasmine plant by the sliding door still hadn't recovered. I misted it anyway, couldn't explain why, just muscle memory. Or maybe guilt. Lisa had gone back to her place after we'd spent 2 hours dissecting HOA bylaws, trying to find a crack. We found language so vague it could be interpreted 10 different ways. Disruption of architectural harmony, public nuisance thresholds, general violations of decorum. Vague on purpose, gives them leverage to weaponize anything. Next morning, I set up a small table and 2 lawn chairs on the balcony, just me and a friend from work. Coffee, nothing loud, no music. But halfway through the conversation, Ronnie from security walked up from below and yelled, "Sir, I've got a noise complaint from Unit 3C. I leaned over the railing. "We're having coffee, you want to come up for a cup?" He didn't smile, just tapped his radio like that was answer enough and walked off. 20 minutes later, I got another violation slipped under the door. Disruptive balcony use, non-social hours. It was 10:40 a.m. I crumpled it and shoved it in the kitchen drawer where the last 3 notices lived. Lisa showed up that evening with a manila folder in her hand and the kind of grin that said she'd found something they didn't want her to see. They updated the digital registry last month, quietly. Guess what disappeared? Me. Ingo. She flipped the folder open. Your ownership still shows up in the county records, but not on Crescent Pines' internal list. That list is what they use to validate votes, send notices, determine resident rights. You've been airbrushed out of your own property. I sat back, arms folded, mind racing. Ciao. Melinda's tight with the property manager. HOA handles the interface. They can override registry entries if deemed erroneous. No appeal needed. She slid over a printout. At the bottom, bold font. Registry overrides may be made to preserve operational continuity. Operational continuity. That's how they said we're taking your voice away. The next week, I didn't leave the unit except to work. Didn't trust the elevator cameras. Didn't want another complaint for breathing too loud. But I was watching. 2 nights later, a notice appeared on my door. Unapproved balcony fixtures. The wind chimes. The ones Mom hung the week after she won the arbitration case. I hadn't touched them in months, still tied to the same hook. I stared at the letter, blinking. They weren't just enforcing rules. They were erasing her. Lisa stood with me on the balcony, her voice quiet. This isn't random, they want you out. I couldn't argue. The pattern was too precise. Small cuts, one at a time, enough to drive someone out without ever touching their front door. Why not go after someone else, I asked. Why me? Lisa shrugged, eyes still scanning the courtyard. Legacy owners are inconvenient. You don't pay inflated dues. You know how things used to work. And you've got no mortgage, which means no leverage. You can't be leaned on. You're a problem. She walked to the railing, ran a hand along the edge. And you're your mother's son. We didn't say anything after that, just stood there as the sun dipped behind the cypress trees, shadows crawling across the lawn where Mom used to lay out with a paperback and her pink sun hat. That night I dug into her old cabinet, still hadn't touched most of it since the funeral. Tucked behind a drawer full of herbal teas and brittle grocery lists, I found a worn folder labeled HOA 2013. She'd kept everything. Citations, letters, even one hand-scribbled note that read, "They might can't evict what they don't understand." And under it, a sticky note in her tiny cursive. "Plant jasmine again in spring, remind him where home is." That folder, those words, they turned something in me. I wasn't here just for me anymore. I was going to defend her memory, her fights, her slab of poured concrete like it was sacred ground, because it was. They could write all the notices they wanted. They scheduled the HOA meeting for 6 p.m. on a Tuesday, like always, just late enough to make working residents miss it, just early enough that retired ones could still fill the folding chairs and nod along to whatever Melinda said. But I went anyway. Lisa told me not to, said they wouldn't listen, said I'd be walking into a fixed game. But this wasn't about winning the vote, it was about being seen. The meeting room was one of those beige multi-purpose lounges at the back of the rec hall. Fluorescent lights, dusty ficus in the corner, coffee machine that hadn't worked since 2009. I took a seat at the back, right beneath a vent that wheezed like it was trying to breathe through a straw. Melinda entered like a politician, shoulders back, fake smile, clipboard in hand. Her blazer looked expensive, like it had never touched a folding chair in its life. The moment she saw me, the corners of her mouth twitched, but she didn't blink. She launched into the meeting like it was theater. Budget updates, pool filter status, vague compliance concerns. No one asked questions. Not until I raised my hand. "Mr. Wells," she said without looking up, "this is a community discussion, not a personal platform." "Then let's discuss the community's money," I replied, calm but sharp. "Where did the $14,300.00 earmarked for landscaping enhancements go? Because the courtyard still looks like a baked potato." A murmur. 3 people glanced at each other. One older guy near the front pulled out a tiny notebook. Melinda didn't miss a beat. Those funds were reallocated, emergency roof drainage work, authorized in April. I requested those documents last month. Still haven't seen a single receipt. She straightened. "Access requires board clearance, and as we've already clarified, you're not currently listed as a verified resident." There it was, out loud. And that's when I noticed her, the secretary. Late 20s, maybe early 30s, tan slacks, blue button down, sitting stiffly 2 chairs from Melinda. Name tag read Janelle Rhodes. She didn't say a word. But her hands. They trembled just slightly as she clicked her pen. Not a word, not a glance, just steady silence and that little tick. I made a choice right then. "You may have erased me from the system, Melinda," I said, rising to my feet, "but my name's still on the deed. My mother's name is on the original incorporation paperwork of Crescent Pines, so unless you're about to evict every legacy owner out of spite, you might want to start treating residents like people, not liability." Melinda blinked once, slowly, then smiled. "This meeting is adjourned." Just like that. A few people stood awkwardly. Some stayed seated, looking around as if trying to figure out if something important had just happened and they'd missed it. Janelle closed her folder. Her hands were still shaking. I followed the hallway out and leaned against the wall by the vending machines. I didn't want confrontation. I just wanted to see who came out last. 10 minutes later, it was Janelle. She walked past me, fast, like she hadn't seen me, but I caught her eye, brief, hesitant. "You don't agree with her," I said gently. "Do you?" She paused, looked at the floor, shook her head once, barely perceptible. "They made me tell me it was temporary," she murmured. "The registry override, just until the paperwork was clean." "My deed is clean, always has been." Her eyes darted down the hall. She shifted her folder from one hand to the other. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Don't ask questions here, they make things difficult." "I'm used to difficult." She hesitated, chewing her lip like something was stuck there. "You should check the storage room basement," she whispered. "End of the south hallway. You didn't hear that from me." Then she was gone. No paper trail, no direct help, but a breadcrumb. Lisa and I met at my unit an hour later. "She's scared," Lisa said, pacing. "That means she knows something real. She wants it fixed, just can't afford to be seen doing it." "She's a crack in the wall," I said, "and every building fails from the inside out." Lisa poured 2 glasses of water. "Whatever's in that basement, it better be worth it." I looked out at the balcony. The wind chimes barely moved. Dead air. "It will be. I can feel it." Not faith, just architecture. You build a thing wrong, eventually the fault lines show. And someone had built this whole HOA around a lie. Where do you think this trail leads? Ever had to dig through someone else's mess just to protect what's yours? Drop where you're watching from. I want to hear your story. And keep watching. What I find in that basement changes everything. The south hallway didn't even show up on the Crescent Pines brochure anymore. You had to take the service elevator, past the old water heater room, and walk 30 feet down a scuffed linoleum floor that smelled like bleach and mildew had been waging war for decades. Lisa followed close behind. She had a flashlight, 2 pairs of gloves, and a look on her face like she'd done this before. "How do we go from coffee on the balcony to sneaking into basements like we're in a spy movie?" she whispered. "Because someone decided erasing people was easier than telling the truth?" I glanced behind us. The hallway curved left, just enough to hide anyone coming from the elevator. The storage room was locked, of course, old gray door, peeling paint, keypad entry that looked like it hadn't beeped since dial-up internet was a thing. I pulled out my phone, opened the HOA app. Scroll. Buried in the resident handbook was a forgotten snippet. In case of emergency, board-issued override code 825. I punched it in. Nothing. Lisa crossed her arms. Maybe it needs a sacrifice. Got a goat? I chuckled, but my mind was racing. Numbers, dates, Mom's folder from the cabinet. Try 31,392. Lisa pressed it. But the door swung open with a reluctant groan. Inside, the room was colder than it should have been. No windows, just flickering overhead lights and rows of boxes, some labeled, some not. Dust rose in lazy spirals. "How long you think this place has been untouched?" she asked. I ran my finger along the edge of a box. Paper grit, old adhesive smell, long enough that no one expected anyone to come looking. We started scanning. Most boxes were boring. Vendor invoices, utility reports, faded pool maintenance logs. But near the back, under a rusted metal shelf, was a crate marked Archived Compliance Legacy Units. I froze. Lisa crouched. "You seeing what Yep, pull it." Inside were paper files, physical, unscanned. That alone felt suspicious in a place that now ran every policy through a sleek digital portal. The top folder was thick, labeled Unit 4B, Historical Correspondence. I flipped it open. Letters. So many of them. Most from Mom. Typed complaints, responses from the board, but one stuck out. Handwritten, ink faded. "This isn't Mom's handwriting," I murmured. Lisa leaned over. "Who's it from?" At the bottom of the letter, a scrawl. "From the desk of Lionel Prescott, HOA Legal Counsel." Did that name ring a bell? I nodded slowly. He was the guy who helped Mom win arbitration back in 2014. She said he was the only one who actually listened. The letter detailed concerns about unauthorized changes to the HOA registry system. It warned that legacy deed holders were being marked as pending status without notification. Lionel had flagged the changes as unlawful and requested a board hearing. No response attached, just a sticky note. He resigned a week later. Lisa exhaled, slow. "This is big. They've been doing this for years." My hands were shaking now, not from nerves, but from that cold fury that hits when you realize your entire battle wasn't just personal, it was designed, pre-built, blueprinted for people like us to lose. Lisa placed a hand on my shoulder. "They'll bury this if you don't act fast." "I'm not going to bury anything," I said. From behind us, a soft clack. We froze. Footsteps. I killed the flashlight. The hallway door creaked open. A voice, low, tense. "Hello?" "Janelle." She stepped in, eyes wide, glancing around like she'd just broken 1,000 rules. "You weren't supposed to be long," she whispered. "Melinda's still upstairs. Someone said they saw you near the rec room." "We found it," Lisa said. "Everything. Registry tampering, legal correspondence. Your board's been rigging compliance for years." Janelle didn't look surprised, just tired. "I believe you. I've seen enough. I just didn't know how to prove it." She walked forward and slid a small USB into Lisa's palm. "I downloaded the server logs 2 nights ago. It shows every registry edit made this year. Timestamps, user credentials. If they try to say it was an accident, they can't." Lisa blinked. "Why are you helping us?" Janelle hesitated, her voice cracked. "Because my mother lost her unit to a bogus compliance fine. She died in a rental last year. She should have had a home here." I nodded. "Then it's not just about us anymore." She turned toward the door. "Get out before Melinda notices. And Darren, be smart. They'll come for you harder now." I smiled grimly. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was scared. I wasn't. Not really. But because once your brain starts piecing things together, personnel, names, fake violations, quiet voices in basements, it doesn't shut off. The file folder, the USB, the resignation letter from a man who once stood up for my mother, all of it lived in my kitchen now, spread across the counter like I was mapping out a war zone. And in a way, I was. Lisa had crashed on my couch. She'd fallen asleep sitting up, arms crossed, still wearing her boots. I envied her calm. The kind of calm that comes from knowing you've already done more than enough, but doing more anyway. At 4:12 a.m. I cracked. I got up and opened the hallway closet. Top shelf. Brown storage box marked Mom, Miss. Buried under old receipts and photo albums was her handwriting, literally, on a rolled-up architectural drawing with coffee stains and lemon-scented candle wax smudges on the edges. Unit 4B, Balcony Retrofit Sketch 1. Her annotations were everywhere. Curved, looping cursive, circles around the drainage line, arrows pointing to the original foundation she'd saved during the fire rebuild. And there, in the lower corner, scrawled in pencil, "No matter what they say, this is ours." I traced my finger over the words. This was the connection. This was the legacy. Not just a name on a deed. Not just her voice in an HOA meeting 15 years ago. She'd lived in every line of this drawing, every screw drilled into the railing, every pot she planted in the concrete garden box they said violated uniformity. I rolled up the blueprint, grabbed the USB from the kitchen, and packed everything into my bag. "Where are you headed?" Lisa mumbled without opening her eyes. "County records. I need to verify the easement line from the original plans. They can't argue with architectural submission numbers." She rubbed her eyes. "It's Sunday." Exactly. No traffic. No HOA vultures watching the front gate. The county building was half dark, staff skeleton thin. I flashed my ID, told the clerk I was checking the property archive for a potential legal filing. She didn't blink, led me to a dusty back corner that smelled like toner and forgotten lawsuits. An hour later, I found what I needed. 2 site maps from 1989, the year the HOA was incorporated. The original boundaries of Unit 4B extended 2 feet past where the current paint line ended, including the slab. The slab. The one Deborah claimed wasn't mine, the one they threatened to fine me over for personal concrete modifications. Except it wasn't a modification, it was original construction. I snapped photos, documented the lot numbers, cross-referenced the old survey map with Mom's blueprint. Every point aligned. The slab belonged to 4B, always had. Which meant the fines, the citations, even the tow notice? Fraudulent. I left the building with my heart pounding. Not from nerves, but purpose. Outside, my phone buzzed. "Lisa, Melinda just called an emergency board meeting. Tonight. No notice to residents. Bet it's damage control." Me, perfect, let her panic, I'm not done yet. Back at Crescent Pines, I spotted Janelle on the second-floor walkway. She saw the blueprint tube in my hand and gave the smallest nod. Her lips didn't move, but her eyes said everything. They're scrambling. I waited till dark to go back into Mom's room. I hadn't touched her dresser since the funeral, but tonight felt different. Inside the bottom drawer, tucked under a silk scarf and her old prescription glasses, was a little wooden box I hadn't seen in years. The first tape clicked into the camcorder like it had never left. Lisa sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop open, fingers hovering over the keys like she was trying to breathe through her fingertips. I hooked the camcorder to an HDMI converter and fed it into the TV. It was grainy, the audio cracked like someone chewing foil, but the footage was gold. The timestamp read, August 19th, 2014, Crescent Pines HOA conference room. My mother sat at the far end of the table, calm, hair pinned back in that clean, elegant way she always wore it for formal meetings. She had a stack of papers, and behind her, yep, Lionel Prescott. Across the table, Melinda. Thinner, less Botox, but the same razor-sharp smirk. "You're asking the board to disregard established architectural standards," Melinda said on the screen. "That's not how procedure works." "I'm not asking," Mom replied. "I'm reminding you that you don't own the standards. You administer them. There's a legal difference." Prescott nodded beside her. "And if the registry was altered without a quorum vote, it's not just a violation of procedure, it's actionable misconduct." Melinda's face went pale. The video cut abruptly. Lisa leaned forward. "Where's the rest?" "Different tape," I said. My hands were already in the wooden box. We watched them all. Violation hearings, late-night walkthroughs, board votes caught off camera. It was like Mom knew she'd need every inch of her legacy recorded, not for herself, but for whoever came next. Somewhere around the fifth tape, I froze. The camera pointed at a pile of boxes. One had the words Archive Compliance, Legislature Units, written in marker. The same box we found downstairs. But in the footage, it was being moved, lifted by a man in a maintenance uniform and handed to Melinda. She signed at the clipboard, nodded, and walked out with it like she was picking up a pizza. She took that box out of rotation on purpose, Lisa whispered. Back then. She knew it'd incriminate her. I paused the screen. Melinda's frozen face stared back at us. This isn't mismanagement, it's orchestration. Lisa stood. We have to drop this, not just to the board, publicly, recorded somewhere she can't scrub it. The community bulletin live stream, I said. They pipe it through the lobby every night for upcoming events. You cue a video on that feed, it plays for everyone walking in or out of the building. Lisa grinned. You ever done it before? I nodded. Wrote the firmware backend in college, got paid $100 in a fruit basket, but I still have the admin panel. We got to work. Lisa trimmed the clips. Mom's arbitration, the registry discrepancies, the footage of Melinda removing the box. I wrote the voiceover, clean, steady, with zero speculation, just facts, documented, time-stamped. We set the video to autoplay at 5:30 p.m., 30 minutes before Melinda's emergency HOA meeting. By 5:27, I was already in the lobby, pretending to check the snack machine. A couple of residents waited nearby, reading flyers. An elderly man sat on the couch, flipping through a gardening catalog. Then the screen flickered. It started. My mom's voice filled the room. This board does not get to erase residents who built this place. The room went still. 2 people looked up, then 5. A woman gasped. The footage rolled into Melinda's registry changes, into the shot of her walking off with the archive box. Gasps turned into murmurs. Lisa stood near the mail slots, eyes wide as the crowd kept growing. Residents coming home, bags in hand, frozen in place like they'd stumbled into a truth they didn't know they needed. At 5:39, Melinda entered. She stopped cold. Watched herself, 10 years younger, stealing the foundation of her power in front of the whole building. Her eyes locked on mine. Turn it off, she hissed, storming past. Can't, I said casually. Firmware's password locked. Wonder who wrote it? She shoved past the front desk and vanished down the hallway. The room buzzed louder now. And in the background, on a loop, my mother's words played again. Belly don't own the standards, they just administer them. Have you ever uncovered the truth too late to share it with the one who deserved justice? Drop your city in the comments. I want to know where people still care about standing up. Because this story, we're just getting warmed up. I stayed in the lobby longer than I needed to. Not to gloat, okay, maybe a little, but because I wanted to watch the shift. That slow unraveling when people realize the ones in charge have been playing God with a fake rulebook. Residents lingered after the video looped a 3rd time. Whispers grew louder. Some started asking questions out loud. One woman even knocked on the front desk and asked, "Who do we call if the board's corrupt?" Melinda didn't show her face again. But someone else did. Janelle. She waited by the stairwell, back pressed to the wall, hands trembling like she was trying to hold something in and failing. I nodded to Lisa, then made my way toward her. She didn't say anything, just gave me a look that said, "Now," and walked. I followed her down 2 levels, past the locked maintenance door we'd passed 100 times but never cared about. She used a key card and led me into the boiler room. The hum of the water lines filled the space. Pipes pulsed like veins in the ceiling. Janelle shut the door behind us and turned, her jaw tight. "I'm gonna burn this place down," she said quietly. Not literally, but reputation-wise. Melinda's already calling in her cousin, the county commissioner. She's gonna say this is all slander. "It's not slander if it's true," I said. She didn't respond right away, just reached into her jacket and pulled out a thin file, paper-clipped, no folder. She handed it to me like it was radioactive. Inside, internal emails between board members, most short, informal, but 2 were different. One was from Melinda, dated 2 months before Mom's appeal in 2014. "If she gets this easement declared valid, we're screwed. Just push the non-compliance narrative. No one reads bylaws anymore anyway." The second was from the board's treasurer, a reply. "We can delay her with code violations, just long enough to shift the charter. After that, she won't have standing." I stared at the page, then back at Janelle. "Why are you showing me this now?" She finally sat down on a rusted stool, rubbed her palms together, because I was in the room when they voted to override her appeal. I didn't say anything. I told myself it wasn't personal, that I didn't have enough proof, but after seeing her on that screen, she looked up, eyes wet. She didn't deserve that, and neither do you. Silence stretched. Boiler hissed. Emble used your mother's grief as a loophole, she added. She'd just lost your father, right? They thought she'd be too distracted to fight. I swallowed hard. She wasn't. But she was alone. Janelle reached into her pocket again, pulled out a flash drive. This is the system backup from when the charter was rewritten. Lionel kept a mirrored copy on the HOA's private cloud. I wasn't supposed to know it still existed, but I did. Why didn't you leak this years ago? I asked. Her voice cracked. Because if I did, they'd have come for me next. But now? They already are. I took the flash drive. You're doing the right thing, I said. She nodded, but the guilt didn't leave her face. I just hope it's not too late. Back in my apartment, I plugged in the drive. There it was, the original HOA charter from 1993, stamped, signed, digitally mirrored with a built-in certificate of authenticity. Ugh. Compared to the current version, live on the website, there were at least 4 altered clauses, all related to member voting rights, easement enforcement, and property modification fines. Lisa hovered behind me. That's your lawsuit right there. It's more than that, I said. It's their entire foundation crumbling. She grinned. What now? I leaned back. Now we go quiet. We let them think they're in control. Because the best part about justice? It's louder when it walks in after the shouting's over. For the next 2 days, I barely said a word. That wasn't me being passive. That was me sharpening my teeth. Lisa and I spent hours poring over everything Janelle gave us. Every timestamp, every clause in the mirrored charter, every email string. She organized the files into a clean, annotated digital folder titled Melinda's Grave. Her idea. Meanwhile, I made appointments, not just 1, 3. County recorder's office, civil litigation lawyer, and a quiet lunch with Carlos Bernal, former HOA treasurer, and the only board member who resigned within 60 days of Mom's failed appeal. He met me at a little Cuban cafe near the courthouse, wore a Panama hat and khakis like he'd just come from a golf course, but his eyes were tired. I figured you'd show up one day, he said before I even sat down. Didn't think you'd wait this long. I had to grow into it, I replied, and get proof. He tapped his iced espresso. You got it now? I slid the folder across the table, flash drive included. He scanned the file names, then gave a soft whistle. Prescott always said your mother was too smart for her own good. Guess it runs in the family. Why'd you walk? I asked. Back then, no one ever gave a reason. He took a long sip. Because she wasn't wrong. The easement issue, the code manipulation, all of it. I didn't want to be complicit, and I couldn't fight it from inside, not with Melinda whispering into every ear. You think she'd still try to fight this? She won't just fight. She'll deny, delay, and blame everyone but herself. I leaned forward. I don't need her to admit guilt. I just need her to say one wrong sentence in front of the right witness. He smiled, almost proud. Still tactical, just like your mom. I left the cafe with one more weapon. Carlos had a backup of the meeting notes from that board vote. He emailed them to me later that evening. The metadata showed they had been finalized before the vote had even taken place. Fabricated minutes. Illegal. Now I had everything. All I needed was the bait. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening. No agenda posted. No minutes from the last meeting uploaded. That in itself was a violation. But they were counting on fear to keep the community silent. I wasn't afraid. Lisa printed 30 copies of the mirrored charter and 3 of the digital logs showing metadata tampering. We didn't need everyone to understand all the legal nuance. We just needed them to see how far it had gone. At 6:03 p.m., we walked into the HOA's meeting room. Same folding tables, same chairs, same faded mural of a fake-looking pine tree painted on the back wall. Melinda sat at the center like a politician mid-scandal, perfect hair, forced smile. 2 other board members flanked her, Grant the Weathervane and Bethany, who once fined a neighbor for excessively ornamental mailboxes. Janelle was there too. She didn't speak, But she sat near the end, her fingers twitching against her coffee cup like she was measuring her pulse. "We'll begin with new business," Melinda said. "There have been rumors, unfounded, regarding previous board actions. This meeting is to address any misunderstanding." I stood. "I've got a question," I said calmly. "Was the 2014 easement appeal from Unit 4B denied before or after the charter was amended?" Her eyes narrowed. "That was handled by the board at the time." "Sure, but the charter was altered on a Sunday, meeting was Tuesday, so which came first?" The room went still. I passed the charter copies down the rows. "These are mirrored documents," I explained, "digitally time-stamped. The one on the HOA website doesn't match this one, especially around easements and modification codes." Murmurs, someone gasped. Melinda's lips thinned. "You can't distribute unverified documents at official meetings." "They're not unverified," Janelle said quietly. All heads turned. I confirmed the metadata, he's right. Melinda's mask slipped for half a second, just enough to show the crack underneath. I stepped forward. "Do you deny altering the charter before that vote?" "You don't get to dictate this meeting." "Do you deny it?" Silence. "Then, the charter needed modernizing. We did what we had to do to protect Crescent Pines." That was it. The sentence she couldn't take back. We did what we had to do. I hit record on my phone. You ever seen someone go from smug to suffocating in under 3 seconds? That was Melinda right after she said, "We did what we had to do." I didn't say anything, just slipped my phone back in my jacket and nodded like I'd just seen the chessboard tilt in my favor. Lisa caught the look and mouthed, "Got it." Meeting ended with no votes, no adjournment. People just got up, quietly, that kind of quiet where folks are realizing they've been conned by someone who smiled while signing the bill. I walked out without turning back. Melinda didn't follow. She knew. That sentence, those 7 words, were an admission. Not criminal, maybe, but in the civil world, enough to burn down her whole paper kingdom? And now I had everything I needed to serve her properly. The next morning, I met with Ainsley Tran, a civil litigation attorney out of Midtown. Her office smelled like lemon oil and laminated rage. She clicked through the files I'd sent her. Charter documents, altered metadata logs, the HOA's own handbook conflicting with the updated one, and of course, the recording. Her eyebrows arched around the 2-minute mark. "You wrote the firmware for the building's media system?" "Yep." "And the charter backup came from a former board member?" "And the confirmation from a current one." She exhaled. "Well, Mr. Fenner, I think you've got yourself a beautiful little civil suit, and a potential injunctive order if we move fast." "I don't want money," I said. "I want control removed. I want the fake fines reversed. I want what my mother built to be restored. And I want every resident in that building to know exactly who's been pulling the strings." She smiled like she hadn't heard that kind of client request in a while. "That's poetic, messy, but poetic. We'll file for injunctive relief this afternoon. Give them 72 hours to respond. I'm going to tag a public notice, too. Let the neighbors see it pinned on her front gate." At 4:02 p.m., Melinda Prescott was officially served. Lisa and I watched from across the street as the courier handed her the envelope. She didn't even look surprised, just stared at it like it had fangs. She tore it open, read 3 lines, then slammed her door so hard it rattled the next unit. That night, someone posted a photo of the notice taped to the HOA bulletin board. No name, no caption, just the document in full view, circled in red pen like a teacher correcting a liar. The comments lit up in the building group chat. "Wait, is that real? They may forged our charter? This explains my cousin getting denied on a fence mod 5 years ago. Can we sue back?" It wasn't just anger now, it was mob energy. And that's what shook Melinda most. Not the legal stuff, not the camera footage, but the residents finally seeing her without her mask, and seeing each other. For the first time in years, they were talking like neighbors again, not hostages under rule. 3 days later, I found a note taped to my door. No name, no envelope, just 3 lines, handwritten, on the back of a landscaping invoice. "Sheen told me to fake 3 of the fine reports in 2020. I still have the drafts. If you need them, I'm at 2D. Martin was the guy who'd been sweeping the courtyard every morning since I moved back, former maintenance manager. No one paid him any mind. And now he'd just cracked open another vault. Lisa looked over the note. If the fines were fabricated too. That's mail fraud, I said. They sent those notices through USPS. She whistled. Felony level now. No more HOA slap on the wrist. I looked out at the lake. It had been my dad's favorite spot, where we'd built that handmade dock out of repurposed redwood and stubbornness. I could still hear his voice every time I walked past it. The truth floats, he used to say. Doesn't matter how deep they try to bury it. He was right. And we were about to let the truth rise like a damn tidal wave. Ever watch someone get served and know they deserved every single syllable on that paper? Drop your city below. I want to know where people still stand their ground when the system tries to bulldoze their peace. Because this is just the beginning of the reckoning. Martine handed me the drafts in a crumpled manila folder that looked like it had been buried under a decade of guilt. She said if I didn't sign them, she'd cut my hours, he muttered. But they were fake, made to look like someone parked too close to the red zone, left bins out on wrong days, stuff like that. Each document bore the HOA letterhead and carried Melinda's digital signature, dated months before any violations supposedly occurred. And the fines? Mailed with USPS tracking codes. Elisa cross-checked everything. These weren't just scare tactics, they were mailed to mortgage lenders too. That's interference. And if it hit escrow, that's real financial damage, I said. Now we had criminal implications. Federal mail fraud, document forgery, possible RICO violations if we stretched. But it wasn't just the legal meat that mattered, it was how fast residents were flipping sides. By midweek, Unit 7A taped up a flyer titled, OA Reform Begins Now. People were signing their names in the laundry room and next to the mailbox bulletin boards, calling for an emergency vote to dissolve the current board. And Melinda? She was spiraling. The queen bee had lost her swarm. Friday afternoon, Lisa called me from the stairwell. You need to come down. Now. Okay. I didn't ask. Just grab my keys. She was standing in the lobby, phone still pressed to her ear, eyes wide. At the front desk stood Grant, one of the two remaining board members. Normally quiet, passive, the kind of guy who didn't even blink unless Melinda did first. But now, he looked cracked, sweaty, red-eyed, pacing like a man who'd realized too late that the fire he'd helped start had finally reached his feet. She's pinning it all on me, he stammered. She told the lawyer I was the one who organized the charter edits, that I pressured Janelle and Carlos to go along with it. You signed the minutes, I reminded him. Because she said we were outvoted. Said she'd backdate the records and file them herself. I didn't know she'd actually changed the charter before the vote. He sat down on the bench like gravity doubled. I just thought we were cleaning things up, making rules simpler. I didn't know we were going to railroad a woman who just lost her husband. That's when I knew it was over. Not legally yet, but structurally. Once the inner circle starts eating itself, the whole foundation crumbles. I crouched beside him. Then prove it. Give a statement, record it, notarize it, doesn't matter, just put it on paper, and I'll make sure it's attached to every exhibit in the case. His head dropped into his hands. You think they'll come after me? Maybe. But I know this. When the fire gets to court, the first person who tells the truth usually walks out clean. He didn't speak again, just nodded. By Sunday, we had 3 declarations. Janelle, Martin, and now Grant. Ainsley was giddy. That's 3 corroborating testimonies. You just turned a civil suit into a reckoning. How long until we get a date? If the judge sees the urgency, it could hit docket by Thursday. Public hearing. Downtown? She grinned. Nope, we filed for jurisdiction here, local municipal building, just 10 blocks from your condo. Lisa looked up from her laptop. You realize what that means, right? Everyone can come. Neighbors, vendors, old board members. Good, I said. They should see how this ends. That night, I walked out to the dock again. The same old planks. One still creaked under my heel, the one Dad always said needed replacing but never got around to. Funny how I used to find that annoying. Now it was the only part of this place that felt honest. I sat at the edge and watched the water flicker under the moonlight. Thought about Mom, about how close they came to erasing her voice with paperwork and arrogance. But they couldn't. Because legacy doesn't get evicted. In truth, it floats. The courtroom wasn't some grand marble chamber with mahogany benches and rows of suits. It was a repurposed conference room in the downtown municipal building. Linoleum floors, flickering fluorescents, and a broken thermostat. But to us, it might as well have been the Supreme Court. By 8:42 a.m., half the complex was packed into the seats. Lisa squeezed in beside me, flipping through our evidence binder like it was a war journal. Behind us, Martin sat, stiff-backed in a borrowed jacket. Janelle clutched a manila envelope like it might fly away if she loosened her grip. Even Grant showed up. No tie, hair a mess, hands shaking, but he showed. At 8:59, Melinda Prescott walked in. She didn't scan the room, didn't meet a single pair of eyes, just walked straight to her attorney and whispered something that made him frown and look toward us. He saw the binder, he saw our witnesses, and for the first time he looked like someone who'd bet on the wrong horse. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Candace Romero, called it to order. She didn't waste time. Today's hearing is in response to a civil motion brought by Mr. Nathan Fenner, contesting the legal actions, charter amendments, and disciplinary enforcements levied against him by the Maple Glen HOA Board, specifically under the direction of Mrs. Melinda Prescott. She looked up. "Mr. Fenner, you may proceed." I stood, not rushed, not dramatic, just deliberate, voice steady. "Your Honor, my mother bought Unit 3F in 1996. She served on the HOA board for 8 years. I moved back after her passing to care for the property she fought to preserve. Since my return, I've been fined, surveilled, and threatened with eviction under a set of bylaws that, until 2 months ago, never legally existed." I turned and handed over the binder. Inside is a digital chain of edits. Dates, file versions, signatures. 3 sworn declarations from board members who now confirm the amendments were filed post-vote, some without board consent at all. We also have proof of mail fraud, violation letters issued for infractions that never occurred, tied to financial penalties and mortgage interference. I paused. And finally, we have audio of Mrs. Prescott stating on record we did what we had to do. The judge motioned for the audio to be played. We all sat still as Melinda's voice crackled through the speaker system. Her tone wasn't just casual, it was smug, like she thought the game was hers and the scoreboard didn't matter. When the audio ended, nobody said a word. Even her own lawyer didn't reach for his notepad. Romero tapped her pen. "Mrs. Prescott, do you contest the authenticity of this evidence?" Her attorney stood slowly. "Your Honor, we acknowledge the audio, however, the context..." "This is a preliminary hearing. Context comes at trial. Right now, I'm determining whether the board, under Mrs. Prescott's leadership, acted beyond its authority and caused measurable harm to Mr. Fenner and other residents." She turned back to me. "Mr. Fenner, what remedy are you seeking?" I looked around, at the faces, the ones that had watched silently while Melinda reigned over them like a tyrant in pearls. "I'm not looking for damages," I said. "I want every fraudulent fine reversed, every surveillance camera checked for breach, the charter restored to the last legal version, and most importantly," I pointed gently, deliberately, "I want Mrs. Prescott removed from her position, effective immediately." Lisa glanced at me, eyes wide. The judge blinked, no reaction, just flipped through the first few pages of our binder, checked the date, nodded once. "Motion to suspend Mrs. Prescott pending full review is granted. The court will issue a formal injunction and begin case review within the next 7 days." Gasps echoed across the room. Melinda stood up, face drained of color, mouth open but no sound. You can't just..." "Ma'am, sit down," the judge said flatly. "Court is not a boardroom, and your board just got dissolved." The gavel dropped, not loud, but final. We stepped outside into the morning light. Neighbors were already texting, sharing screenshots. "She's out. He did it. We've got our complex back." Lisa slid off her heels and sighed. "You know this isn't the end, right?" I smiled. "Yeah, but it's the first morning in a long time that feels like mine." The official removal notice went up 3 days later, a printed sheet, taped crooked on the HOA bulletin board. Effective immediately, the Maple Glen HOA board has been suspended pending restructuring under municipal oversight. Interim board elections will be held within 30 days. Someone had already scrawled across the bottom in Sharpie, "Told you." I didn't go out to celebrate, didn't host a victory barbecue like Martin suggested, even though Lisa showed up with a six-pack and an obnoxious balloon that said "Karma served cold." Instead, I went to the dock. Same path, same creaky board under my left foot, only this time, I didn't flinch. The lake was still, flat as glass, but not empty. A single candle floated out past the bend, a memorial from one of the new families. Their dad had died of cancer. HOA fined them for leaving hospice signage on the front lawn, and somehow we'd made that kind of thing stop. Lisa came walking up behind me, barefoot, holding her shoes. "You ever gonna fix that board?" "Nah," I smiled. "It reminds me who I am, who she was." She didn't ask who she meant. She already knew. The next few weeks were quiet in a way that felt earned. People stopped whispering when they walked past the office door. Janelle rejoined the gardening committee. Grant helped repaint the breezeway himself. No complaints, no clipboard. Even the couple from 5C who used to duck their heads whenever Melinda marched by started waving again. What the best part? The HOA server reset. Everything Melinda had wired into her oversight system, cameras, gate logs, fines, was scrubbed, wiped clean under court order. And Lisa, being the tech wizard she is, replaced it with an open source system residents could actually vote to control. "Transparency, baby," she said. "Turns out it's more powerful than fear." I thought I'd feel this rush of satisfaction, some booming sense of justice being served. But honestly, it was smaller than that, quieter. It was me, standing in front of my mom's old photo in the hallway, wiping off the dust. It was unlocking the cabinet in the basement and finding her notebook. Handwritten notes about budget meetings, reminders to call people by name, underlined words like dignity and belonging. That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about legal victories or petty revenge. It was about holding the line when no one else would. The night before the new board election, I spoke at the community forum, not because I wanted a seat. I didn't. I just wanted people to remember how close we came to forgetting ourselves. When someone builds a system on silence, I said, every voice raised is an act of rebellion. And sometimes, all it takes to beat a bully is keeping your records clean, your head down, and your back straight when it's time to speak. The room went still after that, not because it was a great speech, but because they understood it. We'd been afraid, but now we had each other again. Grant came up to me afterward, looked healthier, wore a clean shirt. "Do you ever think about running for chair?" "Not a chance," I laughed. "I've already got a full-time job, making sure nobody like Melinda ever gets that power again." He nodded. "Well, if you ever change your mind, you've got my vote." On the way home, I passed the tree Mom planted the day she moved in, an old dogwood with roots that had cracked the sidewalk. I used to hate that crack. Now, I walk around it. Some things deserve space to grow. Bullies build their castles on silence, but if you make enough noise, enough right noise, the whole damn thing comes down. Nathan Fenner. Drop a comment if you've ever dealt with an HOA nightmare. Where are you watching from? Let's remind him this time the quiet ones fought back and won.